Kawasaki's headlight sliced through Detroit's cracked asphalt like a knife. The city was held captive by that famous freezing rain, which pelted the visor of his helmet like bullets, reducing visibility to just a few meters. Caleb felt his fingers go numb from the cold as he gripped the handlebars, but he couldn't stop. The flashing purple surge pricing alert on the NightDash app screen was a sign he could cover tonight's rent. App audio notification, new order, route, Vanguard Project, Block 4. Earnings $180. Content, priority delivery. Warning, elevator out of service. Caleb pulled the throttle to the right, lifted his visor, and exhaled his vaporizing breath. The smell of wet asphalt and the chemical-laden air from distant factories filled his lungs. $180, he muttered. His voice sounded muffled inside the helmet. Who pays $180 for a sandwich? He looked at the map. The navigation system had plotted the route to the north of the city, to the area where those massive, brutalist public housing projects, abandoned 10 years ago, were located, to a place called the Spire. On the map, it was a gray, unmarked area. The GPS signal was intermittent at that point, but money was money. Caleb pressed the accept button without hesitation. He floored the accelerator. As the city lights faded behind him, he began driving toward the darkness at the end of the highway, toward that concrete graveyard. 20 minutes later, he reached his destination. This was where the American dream had died. The massive concrete blocks, built in the 1970s and now left to decay, rose like tombstones in the fog. Most of the windows were boarded up. Massive concrete blocks, built in the 1970s and now left to decay, rose like tombstones in the fog. Most of the windows were boarded up, those that weren't gaped like dark, empty eye sockets. The street, lights had blown out. It was pitch black. The navigation system announced target acquired in front of the last building, which stood taller and more isolated than the others, surrounded by rusty wire fencing. The concrete block at the building's entrance had hell spray painted on it in an illegible font, but it had been crossed out and changed to home. Caleb turned off the engine. He turned off the ignition. The silence was more disturbing than the engine's roar. Not even a distant siren could be heard. It was as if this place had been completely abandoned. Caleb turned off the engine. He switched off the ignition. The silence was more disturbing than the engine's roar. There wasn't even the sound of a siren in the distance. It was as if this place were a vacuum chamber, isolated from the rest of the city. The only sound was that rhythmic sound coming from inside the building, very deep, perhaps reflecting off the parking garage floor. There was only that rhythmic sound coming from deep inside the building, perhaps echoing from the parking garage. Thump, 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 as if a massive machine or a massive heart was beating beneath the concrete. Caleb took the delivery package out of the thermal bag. The package was light, unusually light. It seemed like there was no food inside, just a matte black box and a white label typed on it. Apartment 99. The building had no main entrance door. It had been ripped out. There was just a dark void. Caleb checked that the recording light on the camera on his helmet was flashing. He turned on his phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The lobby reeked of rotten carpet and mold. Old Detroit Free Press newspapers, broken. Syringes and fast food wrappers were scattered on the floor, blown by the wind. The mailboxes had been ripped from the wall. The elevator shaft was like a pitch-black well. The doors were open, but there was no cabin. Great, Caleb said. Apartment 99. What floor is that? 10, 12. He headed for the fire escape. He pushed open the heavy metal fire door. The door creaked shut behind him and locked. Click. Caleb turned and tried the door handle. It wouldn't open. Damn it, he said. Well, I'll just drop the package and get out through the roof or something. He started climbing. First floor. The walls were covered in Bloods and Crips, gang graffiti. Second floor. The graffiti decreased. Third floor. The walls were clean, too clean. They were a dull gray color, as if they had been painted yesterday. Caleb continued climbing. His legs were starting to burn. He looked at his phone. The network signal had dropped to SOS only mode. He stopped when he reached the 5th floor. Something was strange. The architecture of the stairs had changed. On the lower floors, the stairs were concrete. Here, the floor was carpeted. Old, dusty, burgundy carpets like those used in hotel corridors, and the smell had changed. The musty smell was gone, replaced by a heavy scent of lavender and formaldehyde. The silence was gone too. Sounds were coming from the hallways. A television from apartment 501. Tonight's news bulletin. Missing people. Lights seen in the sky. The announcer's voice was mechanical, enunciating each word. A dog barking from apartment 502. But the sound was reversed. The dog wasn't barking. It seemed to be swallowing the bark. Caleb swallowed. He reached for the pepper spray in his coat pocket. Delivery, he shouted into the hallway. His voice didn't echo. The carpet and walls absorbed the sound. There was no answer. He continued climbing quickly. He just wanted to finish this job and get the $180. 6th floor, 7th floor, 8th floor. Caleb froze when he reached the floor where he was supposed to find apartment 99, the 9th floor. There was only one door on the floor, at the very end of the hallway. The door wasn't metal like the others. It was jet black, polished wood. The number 99 was carved into it in brass. There was a doormat in front of the door. A pair of shoes on the doormat. Caleb's blood ran cold. His camera focused on those shoes. Shoes. They were the exact same Nike Air Force. Shoes Caleb was wearing right now. The shoes, they were identical to the Nike Air Force. Shoes Caleb was wearing right now. The wear and tear, the small coffee stain on the left one, the way the laces were tied. His own shoes were standing in front of the door. What the hell? Caleb took a step back. His breathing quickened. My shoes. How? He looked at his shoes. They were on his feet. He looked at the door again. They were there. He dropped the package as if he were throwing it on the ground. He didn't care about the money anymore. Just as he was about to turn away, a piece of paper was pushed out from under the door. Through that thin gap, a yellow-lined notepad. Caleb picked up the paper with a trembling hand. He held it up to the camera. The handwriting was familiar. It was his own handwriting. The slanted, messy handwriting he used in high school. The note contained a single sentence. Don't go down. Below doesn't exist. Caleb crumpled the note in his hand. His heart was pounding in his chest. Panic spread through his entire body like a cold wave. Fuck this, he said, and ran toward the stairs. He started descending the fire escape, skipping 2 or 3 steps at a time. 8th floor, 7th floor, 6th floor, 6th floor, 5th floor. Caleb was descending rapidly. His boots echoed on the concrete. 4, 3, 2, 1. Lobby floor. Caleb ran toward the exit door, the locked fire door. He rammed his shoulder against the door, but the door wasn't there. Where the door should have been, the stairs continued. Downward, where the lobby, the exit, the parking garage should have been. There was another staircase leading into the darkness, and on the wall, written in spray paint, fresh, flowing paint. Leveled. No, Caleb said, breathless. His camera scanned the area. No, I came in here. This was. The exit, the entrance was here. He looked around. There were no gang graffiti, no newspapers. This wasn't the entrance. This was just another floor. He looked up in panic, up the stairwell. Maybe he had mixed up the floors. He started going back down, running. Level -2, level -3, level -4. The stairs descended like an endless spiral, like a DNA helix. Caleb stopped. He leaned on his knees. His stomach churned. The dizziness made the whole world spin around him. He took out his phone. Network, no service. But there was a new notification on the screen. A message from the NightDash app. Customer message, 03:10 a.m. Don't rush, Caleb. The road is long. The food shouldn't get cold. Take care of yourself. As Caleb read the message, he heard a sound from the depths of the stairwell, far below. The sound of his own motorcycle. Vroom, vroom. His Kawasaki was running. Down below, way down below. But Caleb had left the bike outside, on the sidewalk. The sound was coming from inside, from deep within the ground, as if the building had swallowed his motorcycle and was now digesting it. Caleb shouted into the stairwell with a mix of fear and anger. Hey, Who's there? Is this joke? His voice echoed, but the echo didn't return as Caleb's voice. It came back as a muffled, raspy, metallic whisper. Exit, none, courier, delivery. Must be completed. Caleb grabbed the stair railing. The metal was ice cold. When he pulled his hand away, he noticed a black, sticky liquid in his palm. It wasn't motor oil. It was like ink, like tar, something alive. The liquid moved in his palm. It was trying to get under his skin. And the walls, those gray concrete walls, had begun to breathe. The cracks in the plaster widened and narrowed, swelling and deflating like the building's lungs. This building, the Vanguard Towers, wasn't made of stone and steel. This building was alive, and Caleb was in its throat right now. Caleb was hypnotized by the rhythmic sound of his boots pounding the concrete stairs. His breath was short, his lungs burning from inhaling the heavy, metallic air. The wide-angle lens of his GoPro camera recorded the constantly rotating, identical gray walls and rusty handrails. Level -16. Level. This is impossible, Caleb whispered. His voice didn't echo in the stairwell. The walls swallowed it. This building's parking garage can only be 2 stories high. Detroit's ground is swampy. They couldn't go this deep, but he was going down. The graffiti on the walls changed with each floor. The aggressive gang symbols on the upper floors gave way to strange, geometric symbols as they descended. It was as if someone had carved these shapes into the wall with their nails, not spray paint. Spirals, interlocking eyes, toothy mouths. Level. Here, the structure of the stairs began to change. The concrete steps had softened. With every step Caleb took, it felt like he was stepping not on a hard surface, but on hardened rubber or a layer of dried flesh. The floor flexed slightly, and that black liquid, the tar-like substance seeping from the banisters and the joints of the walls, had increased. It was no longer dripping, it was flowing. The walls were sweating. Caleb ran his gloved hand along the wall. His glove became coated with a black, sticky substance. He brought it close to the camera. The substance was moving. It was trying to seep into the glove's pores, to melt the fabric. Acid, Caleb said, frantically pulling off his glove and tossing it down into the darkness of the stairwell. This building is digesting. Just then, the phone at his waist vibrated. The network still showed no service, but the NightDash app was working. This was not related to the internet, but to a local network, the building's own internal network. A voice call appeared on the screen. Caller, NightDash support. Caleb pressed the green button with trembling fingers and put it on speaker. Hello, help me. I'm trapped in the Vanguard Towers. There's no way out. The voice on the other end froze Caleb's blood. It wasn't the standard customer service representative voice. It was Caleb's own voice. but the words seemed to be cut and pasted from sentences Caleb had said before. Delivery, static to the door. Static was it left. Caleb. Who are you? Caleb shouted. Why are you imitating my voice? The voice on the phone laughed. But it wasn't a real laugh. It was Caleb's laugh from a YouTube video. It was looped, a mechanical laugh. Open it, Caleb. Static, open the package. What? Aren't you curious about what's inside the box? Static. Caleb hung up the phone. He put the device in his pocket. The thermal bag on his back suddenly felt heavy. The black box, which had been as light as a feather at the entrance, now felt heavy, as if it contained a brick or a moving animal. He didn't open the bag zipper. He didn't want to open it. He continued down. Level. The stairs ended. The endless loop ended in front of a massive, rusted iron door. Above the door was a lever handle reminiscent of a ship's door, and the metal surface of the door was hot. When Caleb approached, the hot, humid air hitting his face felt like opening the door of an oven. Above the door was a brass sign, mechanical room/boiler room. But the word boiler was crossed out, and instead, a knife had carved. But the word boiler was crossed out, and instead, someone had carved with a knife. Stomach. Caleb forced the door handle. The rusty mechanism turned with a groan reminiscent of the building's own sigh. Jeers. He pushed the door and stepped inside. This was no boiler room. This was an industrial nightmare. The space was the size of a football field, and the ceiling was so high it couldn't be seen. Huge, rusty pipes wrapped around the walls and sealing like the veins of an organism. The sound of the liquid flowing through the pipes was like a roaring river, but the most terrifying things were the floor and the walls. There was no concrete. Everywhere was covered in a biomechanical fabric. Cables were fused with a pink, flesh-like substance. Fluorescent lights flickered and burned inside sockets made of bone. And in the center, in the exact center of the room, was a massive pit, a circular hole, about 10 meters in diameter. A red light and unbearable heat rose from within. And that sound, thud, 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 the heart of the building, or its stomach. As Caleb approached the pit, his foot caught on something. He lowered the camera. It was a delivery bag, orange. It had the DoorDash logo. A little further on, another one, Uber Eats. Further on, a blue Amazon Prime jacket. This was a graveyard. Dozens, maybe hundreds of delivery bags, helmets, jackets, and shoes, all piled up here. The bags were empty. No food. No couriers either. Only their clothes remained. Just like in the Dave Miller case, the bodies had been digested, leaving only synthetic, indigestible materials, nylon, plastic, metal behind. Caleb recoiled, saying, God, it's eating us. It called us here. Just then, there was movement at the edge of the pit. A figure rose from the darkness. Its back was turned to Caleb. It wore a NightDash uniform. On its head was a helmet identical to Caleb's. On its back was a backpack identical to Caleb's. The figure slowly turned. Caleb waited in horror, expecting to see his own face in the helmet's visor. But the visor was open, and inside the helmet was empty, dark, but a voice came from within that darkness, not the imitation voice from the radio. A wet, guttural voice. Order delivered. The bag on Caleb's back suddenly shook violently. The black box inside was straining against the bag zipper. Caleb tried to throw the bag off his back and escape. The straps were wrapped around his shoulder. As he frantically tried to unclip them, the bag's zipper ripped open from the inside. The black box fell to the ground. The lid opened by itself. There was no food inside the box. Inside the box was a piece of meat, about the size of a fist, resembling human skin, with pulsating veins on it. The piece of meat merged with the biomechanical floor the moment it touched it. It took root, and from that huge pit in the middle of the room, that stomach, the sound of Caleb's engine rose. VROOM. But this sound was not mechanical. It was the roar of an animal. Kawasaki began to rise from inside the pit, but it was no longer made of metal. Its wheels were made of flesh, its exhaust of bone, and its headlight was a huge yellow eye. The motorcycle had become part of the building, and now it wanted its rider. Caleb shouted no and ran to the door, but the door he entered was gone. The wall had closed. The pipes around him began to twist like snakes and reach out toward him. The voice on the phone was heard again. This time it wasn't through the app, but from the rusty speakers in the room, coming from the entire building. Customer is waiting for you. Caleb, apartment 99. It's you. Caleb pulled the knife from his waist. He stabbed the pipes, those flesh-like walls. The walls bled, black, tar-like blood. The building groaned in pain. The floor shook. Caleb lost his balance and fell onto the pile of courier bags. The pile shifted, and Caleb began to slide toward the edge of the pit. At that moment, the biological engine emerging from the pit pressed its front wheel against Caleb's chest. It weighed tons. He heard his ribs crack. The yellow eye, the motor's headlight, focused on Caleb's face, and from the motor's body came Caleb's own voice. No tip. The helmet camera recorded the motor's toothed mouth opening and grabbing Caleb's head. The last thing seen in the footage was the black liquid filling Caleb's throat as he screamed. Then static noise and darkness. Caleb was gasping for breath under the weight of that ton on his chest. The thing pressing down on him was the Kawasaki motorcycle he had once worked extra shifts to pay off. But now it was no longer just metal and plastic. The engine's fuel tank had become a bobbing, leather-covered chest cage. The handlebars were twisted like bone horns, and the headlight, that yellow light. The motorcycle's gas tank had become a rising and falling, leather-covered ribcage. The handlebars were twisted like bone horns, and the headlight, that huge yellow eye, was staring right at Caleb's face, just a few inches away. The pupil opened and closed like a camera lens, focusing. The front grille, the motorcycle's mouth, opened. There was no sound of gears turning from inside. Instead, there was the squelching of wet flesh and the smell of hot, rotten meat. The front grille, the bike's mouth, opened. There was no sound of gears turning inside. Instead, the squelch of wet flesh and a breath reeking of warm, rotten meat hit Caleb's face. That breath was a mixture of exhaust, fumes, and stomach acid. Caleb, in a last desperate act, freed his right hand and grabbed a broken piece of pipe next to him. Its end, sharp like a spear. "Stay away from me," he snarled. He rammed the piece of pipe into the engine's yellow eye with all his strength. Crack! The eye exploded like an egg. A yellow, viscous liquid spurted onto Caleb's helmet, visor, and neck. The liquid was acidic. It began to sizzle and melt the plastic of the helmet. The motor beast let out a pained scream. The sound was somewhere between a high-revving engine hitting redline and the bellow of a wounded animal. The creature staggered backward, pulling its claw-like front wheels from Caleb's chest. Caleb didn't miss his chance. Moaning in pain, he rolled to the side. At least 2 of his ribs were broken. Breathing felt like a knife stabbing his lung. But he couldn't stop. Crawling, he fled behind the pile of courier bags into a dark recess at the base of the wall. His helmet visor had melted, blurring his vision. He ripped the helmet off his head. He clipped his GoPro camera to his chest pocket. The air he breathed was no longer filtered. He drew that heavy, metallic smell of blood, the formaldehyde seeping from the walls, directly into his lungs. The hollow at the base of the wall looked like a ventilation tunnel, but it wasn't made of metal. Its inner surface was ridged like an esophagus, damp and soft. Caleb entered the narrow tunnel. He began crawling. The tunnel was narrow. His shoulders rubbed against the side walls. The walls were hot, and they were pulsing like a heartbeat. Every time Caleb moved forward, the tunnel contracted, either pushing him forward or squeezing him. "This building is alive," Caleb muttered, on the verge of madness. "It's alive and trying to swallow me." As he moved through the tunnel, he noticed strange protrusions in the texture of the walls. He held his camera up to the wall. He held his camera up to the wall. They were faces, human faces embedded in the fleshy texture of the wall, as if stuck in mud. Some were rotting, some were just bones, but some were still fresh. Their eyes were closed. Their mouths had fused with the texture of the wall. Caleb saw a familiar face, a young boy wearing a blue domino's cap. Half his face was sucked into the wall. The boy's eyelids fluttered and opened. He had no eyes. His eye sockets were filled with the building's black liquid. His lips parted with difficulty. A whisper from the wall. 30 minutes. Caleb tried to retreat in horror, but the tunnel narrowed behind him. There was no turning back. "Let me go," he shouted. His voice was muffled in the tunnel. The child's face sank deeper into the wall. Delivery delayed. Caleb swallowed the bile in his stomach and continued crawling forward toward the faint light at the end of the tunnel. His elbows were torn, his knees bleeding. About 20 meters later, the tunnel opened into a large room. Caleb let himself fall into the void and landed on a wet, soft floor. This place resembled an archive room, but it wasn't filled with files. This was the building's memory. There were thousands of small, glass-like capsules on the walls. Inside each capsule was an object: a watch, a wedding ring, a child's toy, a denture, a pair of glasses. These were things the building couldn't digest. Inorganic memories made of metal and plastic. The remains of the building's victims. In the middle of the room, a massive, fleshy cocoon hung from the ceiling. The cocoon was semi-transparent. Inside, something was growing. Caleb straightened up on his trembling legs. He approached the cocoon. The shape of the thing inside was human-like, but its arms were very long. It had no fingers, just blade-like bones extending from its hands. And its face. Caleb was looking at his own face. The thing inside the cocoon was a copy of Caleb, but an enhanced copy. A stronger, more resilient version, adapted to the building's ecosystem. Caleb's skin was pale and soft. The one in the cocoon's skin was hard and gray like armor. He remembered that message from the NightDash app. "You are Unit 99. They didn't want to kill Caleb. They wanted to change him. The old Caleb would be absorbed, and this new, efficient Caleb would be born." Just then, a voice came from a shadow at the other end of the room. A human voice, shaky, weak, but real. "Don't touch him." Caleb spun around, startled. He shone his phone's flashlight in that direction. In the corner of the room, almost fused with the wall, a man whose lower half had melted into the floor stood. He wore an old, tattered FedEx uniform. His hair was thinning, his skin gray. The man was like a living corpse. Half his body had been absorbed by the building, but his consciousness was still intact. Who are you?" Caleb asked. The man responded with a bitter smile. His teeth were jet black. "I am 2018, the man said. Or 2019. I don't remember. I think my name was Mike. But now, I'm just delayed cargo." Caleb approached the man. "How do I get out of here? There must be an exit." Mike shook his head. "There is no exit, son. This is a loop. That bonus brought you here, didn't it? That high rate. It brought us all here. Our greed. The building feeds on greed." Mike pointed to the cocoon on the ceiling with his hand. "That's your backup. While you rot here It will go out. It will run your engine. It will go to your home. It will live your life. But it won't eat. It will bring new victims to the building. Caleb remembered his own shoes at the apartment entrance. He remembered the note on the door. Don't go down. He hadn't written that note. Maybe the previous Caleb had written it. Or maybe it was the thing in the cocoon. I won't let that happen, Caleb said. He took the knife from his pocket. You can burn it, said Mike. His eyes flashed. You can burn this place down. This building is alive, yes. But like any living thing, it doesn't like fire. It will suffer. Mike pulled an old metal Zippo lighter from his pocket with a trembling hand. I've kept this for years, but my fingers don't work anymore. They've fused to the wall. You do it. He tossed the Zippo to Caleb. Caleb caught the lighter in midair. The metal was hot. He looked around. The floor of the room was covered in that flammable black oil seeping from the walls. If he set this place on fire, he would burn too. But what was the alternative? To be buried in the wall, turning into a face that whispered forever, or to let that thing in the box steal his life. Caleb made his decision. Hey, Mike, he said, the order's been canceled. He flicked his lighter. The flame bloomed like a hopeful orange flower in the dark room. Caleb brought the flame close to the pool of black liquid on the floor. Just then, the ceiling of the room split open. From above, the motor monster leaped down. One of its eyes was blown out, but it could still smell. The engine roared. VROOM. It lunged at Caleb. Caleb threw himself aside and flung the lighter at the giant cocoon. The cocoon, covered in sticky liquid, caught fire instantly, as if doused in gasoline. Whoosh! Flames engulfed the cocoon. The new Caleb, inside, let out a shrill scream. It sounded like glass scraping against metal. The building shook. The walls buckled. Acid began dripping from the ceiling. The fire spread along the black liquid in the room, onto the walls, and then into the tunnels. Fire began coursing through the building's veins. Mike laughed amid the flames. Burn, burn, you filth, burn. Caleb saw, through the smoke, at the other end of the room, that the wall had cracked. A tear caused by the building's convulsions. Not a crack showing outside, but a crack showing upward to a pipe system resembling a sewer. Caleb ran there. Motor Monster was behind him. Caleb threw himself into the crack. He fell into a narrow, foul-smelling pipe. The wave of flames behind him swallowed Motor Monster. The monster's explosion echoed inside the pipe. Caleb began climbing upward inside the pipe. This was the building's chimney, or its windpipe. Hot smoke rose. Caleb was suffocating. But above, far above, he saw a gray light belonging to the real sky. He climbed. His nails broke. His hands burned. But he climbed. The sun rose faintly and reluctantly from behind Detroit's gray clouds. The spire, as it was known, loomed more menacingly than ever in the quiet of the morning. But today, the building was surrounded by police tape, fire trucks, and heavy construction equipment. Patrol officer Miller leaned against the hood of the squad car, trying to warm the coffee cup in his hand. Next to him, the site foreman of the company that would carry out the demolition order adjusted his helmet and looked at the building. "Strange," said the site foreman. "There's no smoke coming from the building. We got a fire alarm, but there's no smoke." Officer Miller shook his head. "The number that made the call, that number is no longer in service. And the voice recordings that came in, they didn't sound human. There was a strange movement on the surface of the building. The windows were flowing like melted wax. The concrete was rippling as if it had liquefied." "Look at that," said the chief, pointing to the 10th floor of the building. On the exterior of the 10th floor, a massive bulge had formed. It was as if a huge tumor was growing beneath the building's skin. The bulge pulsed, and then it exploded. But it wasn't concrete and brick that exploded. What exploded was a black, tar-like liquid. It poured down the building's facade like a waterfall, and something was thrown out of that crack. A small black dot. It fell downward under gravity and slammed into the wet asphalt right in front of the police barriers. Thud. Officer Miller and the site manager drew their weapons and ran over. The thing lying on the ground was a human, or what was left of one. His clothes were melted, fused to his skin. His body was covered in burns. It was Caleb Vance. He was still breathing, but with every breath, black smoke came out of his mouth. He was clutching something tightly in his hand, a half-burned iPhone with a cracked screen. Officer Miller shouted into his radio, "Call an ambulance." He knelt beside Caleb. "Hey, kid, can you hear me?" Caleb opened his eyes. The whites of his eyes were gone. They were completely black. His lips moved. Miller leaned closer. Caleb's whisper echoed, as if coming from a windy hallway in a building. Stomach washed. Caleb's hand went limp. The phone fell to the floor. The phone's screen was still on. The NightDash app. There was one last notification on the screen. Order completed. Earnings, your life. Rating 1 star. At that moment, a terrible sound came from the building. A scream, but it wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of concrete, steel, and glass writhing in agony. The building's foundations shook. The firefighters retreated. "It's collapsing," someone shouted. But the building wasn't collapsing. The building was vomiting. Tons of black liquid, bone fragments, hundreds of motorcycle helmets, courier bags, and shoes spewed out through the windows, doors, and cracks. The building was expelling its poison, that fire, that undigestible piece Caleb, and the fire he had started. The demolition crews couldn't approach the building that day. The demolition crews couldn't approach the building that day. But that night, while cleaning up the debris and black liquid, the site manager found something strange. The concrete block at the building's entrance. The word home on it had been erased. In its place, as if carved from the concrete itself, a new, raised inscription had appeared. In its place, as if carved from within the concrete, a new embossed inscription had appeared. I'm hungry. Caleb Vance survived, but he never spoke again. Now, he is held in a windowless room in a mental hospital outside the city. According to the nurse's reports, Caleb only reacts at mealtimes. He doesn't eat the food placed before him. He doesn't eat the food placed in front of him. He just stares at the plate and constantly whispers the same thing. No tip, no tip, no bottom. And whenever a courier arrives at the hospital, the walls in Caleb's room begin to sweat, oozing a black liquid.